I think Nehemiah is sometimes mishandled by people who want to jump too quickly to application. You know, they see it as a manual in leadership. It's not that. It contains great lessons about leadership, but it wasn't written as a book to show us how to lead or whatever. You can draw certain valid lessons from that. But I think what the preacher needs to do, first of all, is explain the text in its context. And this is part of the great story of redemption. And in that sense, it points directly to the gospel. And what Nehemiah was doing was leading a revival that was bringing people who had lived and in many cases been born in captivity, and he is reacquainting them with the truth of their fathers and the authority of Scripture and the story of redemption up to then, and they become part of the story of redemption through their revival, through their living and all of that. And it's just one great chapter in the Old Testament about how the way was prepared for the Messiah. And in that sense, it points to Christ. I don't think it's appropriate for the preacher who wants to, you know, preach the gospel even when he's in the Old Testament. It's not appropriate to symbolize the elements of Nehemiah and try to make that you know, some sort of parable about the gospel. It's not that. It's a real live story about a real live man. And it needs to be interpreted that way. But Nehemiah, like all the Old Testament, points forward, is pointing to Christ. He's preparing the nation in anticipation for their Messiah. And there are certain gospel truths that rise to the top there, not the least of which is the depravity of, you know, the human heart, where these people undergo a great revival. They respond to God, they make all sorts of promises, and then instantly they break those promises. Well, that's just how we are. And it's part of our lost condition. And I think the faithful preacher needs to point that out and then explain that the solution to that problem is Christ, rather than trying to turn Nehemiah into a Christ figure or make the wall a symbol for, you know, spirit baptism or whatever it is people do with Nehemiah. But preach it in its historical context and then show what is actually true about it, that it points to Christ.